Hello, Guitar Smarts fans. Before you check out this podcast, I want to make you aware of a cool new place where you can interact with other Guitar Smarts listeners. It's a Facebook group called the Guitar Geek Hangout. That's where we hang out and talk about all things guitar. So, if you like the Guitar Smarts podcast, come and chat with Kiran and myself over in the Guitar Geek Hangout on Facebook. Maybe check out some pre-podcast clips and even get involved in asking and answering lots of questions from the other page dwellers. Hope to see you there. It should be something that you find beautiful to look at as well, because even if it satisfies all of those points that you made and it plays brilliantly and it's in perfect condition, if it still looks like a Parker Fly, you're not going to want to buy it. Oh, yeah.
Poor Parker
the Fiat
Fly.
multiplier of the guitar world. I mean...
Was it as ugly as the Fiat multiplier? That is the worst car that anybody has ever decided to build in my life. Gee whiz.
Greetings, welcome to another Guitar Smarts podcast. Thanks very much for downloading. So, if you've ever bought a used car, you'll know that it's fraught with danger. You've got to know the history, you've got to know that it hasn't been mistreated, do your research on the cars that you're looking at, and generally build a lot of confidence in the process. This week we're talking about buying used guitars, and the process is really very much the same. You've got to feel confident, and you've got to feel informed, and you've got to ask questions and know as much as you can, and try and get yourself past a threshold of confidence that you're making the right decision. So that's what we're talking about this week, the pitfalls and tips and all about buying used guitars. Come and follow us on our social media pages. You can find us at facebook.com/Guitar Smarts. Come and give us a like there, and you can find us on Instagram as well at guitar_smarts. And remember, in whatever podcast app that you choose to listen to us on, subscribe or follow so that it automatically downloads. That really helps us to grow as well. And if you can give us a thumbs up or a rating in your podcast app, that will also really help with getting us into search results for guitar-based podcast. Anyway, that's enough waffle from me. Let's get to it. Hey Kiran, how you doing, mate? You well?
I'm really good, buddy. I'm really looking forward to today's chat. Today's conversation. Yeah, I'm really good, mate. How are you?
Yeah, good. Busy couple of weeks. The weather's been fantastic. I've been loving that. It's not good today. But, why do we always talk about the weather, by the way? It's because we're British. That's right. But yeah, I'm good. Happy. Work's good. Family's good. We're actually self-isolating at the moment because the NHS app told us to. But we're all okay. We're all negatively tested. And we're all healthy and happy. And yeah. But yeah, I'm good. What about you? What's been happening with you the last couple of weeks?
So last couple of weeks, a few different things. In terms of guitar-y stuff, doing loads of mods to some of the Tokai Les Pauls, to the Tokai Les Pauls that I bought, and that's gone really, really well. So I think we're going to have a chat, aren't we, on an upcoming podcast about the mods that I've been doing and some of the mods that you've been doing to your gear as well. So we can
it's a good point. I haven't done the usual weekly check of what is hung up and on stands behind you, just to make sure, because I have missed one previously.
You said
I was losing it. Yeah, it all looks good and well.
We recorded a podcast last week and I had a brand new guitar hanging literally right above my head.
I know.
And didn't notice for the entire podcast. It's brilliant. You are slipping, mate. You are slipping. So, we'll do an episode on the mod stuff. But yeah, I've had a great week of stripping down these two guitars back to their components. Not that there was anything wrong with them, but I could see the potential that could be unleashed from them by a few simple mods. So that's all been done now, and it's been such a rewarding process. So that's been brilliant to do. And then band rehearsals are going pretty well. So we are scheduled to be out and gigging from the 3rd of July, but that first gig certainly may have been scuppered by the change in the rules. We were supposed to go back to our new normal on the 21st of June, but Boris has announced that that's going to be delayed until the 19th of July. So just kind of keeping an eye on that. So when gigging can begin. And then from the podcast side of things, mate, we hit 2,000 downloads this last week. So I'm delighted with that. That's incredible.
And in almost exactly half the time it took us to do 1,000. So we did 1,000 downloads in about 4 months, and then we've hit 2,000 about 2 months after that. So we're growing nicely, and it's obviously thanks to, if you're listening, thank you very much for joining us on this, because it's really nice to see people listening and downloading. So thank you.
It really is. And some of the countries that folk are based in, I'd just love to hear from them. I mean, we've got an incredible group of people following us in the US in a range of different states, which would be brilliant. I'd love to hear from those folk, and we're going to give you at least some of those states a shout out in kind of future podcasts and things like that. We've got some really good followers in the UK, obviously, that's where we're based. But, some other countries, featuring like Canada and Philippines. We've got some people listening in the Philippines, which is absolutely amazing. So, it's just brilliant to see kind of the global reach of what you can do with these podcasts, and the fact that there are people in such wide-ranging countries that are listening to us, for us to hit those kind of numbers and keep growing, which is brilliant. That's the assumption that I'm working on. It could all be somebody based in London using a VPN and just bouncing it off the Philippines. I have no idea how these metrics work, but I'd like to believe that there are some people in the Philippines listening to us avidly every week, which would be amazing. So if you're genuinely there in the Philippines listening to us, as well as the US, etc., get in touch. Tell us who you are. Tell us what you like. That'd be brilliant.
That's it. Yeah, that would be so cool to hear from people. Awesome. So, what are we talking about this week, Kiran? Because this is an interesting one. I've been looking forward to this subject.
Well, I think we've got a lot to learn from each other on this one, and something we could have a good chat about. So, back in episode 9, we for our listeners who will have heard that episode, we challenged ourselves around spending 300 British pounds, around $400 there or thereabouts, on either a new guitar or a second-hand guitar. And one of the things that came out of it is I think it's fair to say we were a little bit sad, disappointed maybe, to see the state of what was on the second-hand market in terms of people's expectations around price and, value that represented. Would you say we were a bit miffed about that?
Definitely. And I seem to remember that you laid the blame squarely at the feet of Joe Bonamassa, didn't you? I seem to remember.
I blame Joe Bonamassa for a lot of things. I mean, he deserves it all. Incredible musician, super talented, knows his guitar knowledge inside out.
We're being facetious there, obviously. We love Joe Bonamassa, but I know what you meant. I think there was an element of, I think a lot of people that are selling equipment, and I got to say, I think it's specific to guitars, right? I don't see this with pedals. I actually think, people go to the second-hand market for guitars and pedals and amps. Everything else you need, people tend to buy new. You very rarely see second-hand guitar leads and accessories and things like that.
Yeah,
pedals, right. I always see, if I'm looking on eBay or second-hand sections of, the main retailers, I think the prices reflect correctly a lot of the time what you should expect to pay for something that's second hand. It does seem to be guitars, just electric guitars specifically, I think, where there seems to be, or at least that's what we found in episode 9, right? Seems to be a miscalculated expectation from a lot of sellers as to what is a reasonable price to expect of a guitar. Is that how you felt about it as well? Yeah,
it is. It is, absolutely, mate. And I agree with you. I think it is probably more acute with the guitar market. Certainly, it's very rare that you see that a pedal has massively appreciated in value and increased based on the time it was bought, unless it's obviously something ridiculous like the Klon Centaur or that ilk. Most people, charge a fair price for what is a used piece of gear, provided it's, all in good working order. But we were seeing some strange things, and still are seeing some strange things going on with guitars in terms of price and value. But I say that, and I didn't want to put anybody off, and I don't think we wanted to put anybody off in terms of buying used gear, and particularly used guitars, because that should be a really, buoyant market, and people should feel, encouraged to do that, because I think there are still some bargains out there that you can find with a bit of knowledge. And particularly if you're looking for gear that's been discontinued or kind of, isn't as widely available new now, the secondhand market is still a good place to go. So we thought, well, let's have a chat about, some basic common sense things when buying used guitars, and how to avoid some potential costly mistakes from, a kind of mechanical and technical point of view on the guitar, what to look out for. And also then just to make sure you get a fair price and buy something that is exactly what you think you're buying. And, I've had experience of doing this myself in terms of selling and buying guitars. You've got great experience of doing this, Matt, as well, particularly with kind of used gear from different kind of platforms and things. So I think it'd be just a really useful, helpful chat that people can take, again, a few things away from, maybe even a mental list of things to consider when they're looking at buying this gear, that they can just run through, so they end up with something that they're happy with rather than something that they end up having regretted buying.
Mm-hmm. So, that's really good. I mean, it's almost like buying a used car, isn't it? It's kind of, some basic things, some things you should check, questions you should ask of the person. You don't want to be buying yourself a complete lemon.
Yeah, exactly.
So where do you want to start with this? Because obviously, there are things that you should expect to check of an instrument, but should we start with where you go looking for these things? Where to look for good deals?
Yeah, I think that makes sense, mate. I mean, look, I would say as a general principle, you should really try to play the guitar that you're looking to buy wherever possible before buying it. And we'll go on to a checklist of some of the things to look out for and kind of figure out on the guitar that you're buying. But often than not these days, there is remote purchasing of this stuff going on through the online kind of portals. And so, you can use the checklist we're going to talk about as well, wherever possible, to try and determine those things about the guitar before you buy it online as well. But yeah, there's so many places now. So, I mean, where are you buying a lot of your stuff from? Is it eBay where you go as your go-to place for secondhand gear, or Reverb? Yeah. There's a whole bunch of different places.
There is a bunch of different places. eBay, I think, is number one for me in terms of finding what it is I'm looking for, because there seems to be a more what's the word I'm looking for? It's just a higher rate of things to find. I can generally find what I'm looking for on eBay. I recently purchased a TC Electronic Nova system, which is the second one I've had, and I got that off eBay for a good deal. There was plenty available, which helps obviously to keep the price at a good level. I got a really good deal on it in terms of price. It's not in perfect nick, but I wasn't looking for one that had to be in perfect nick anyway. I was looking for one that was in the price point I was looking for, and I knew what I could expect in the price point I was willing to pay. So I found I had more options on eBay, really. There is obviously the risk of you're not getting to see it before you buy it, but that's a risk I was willing to take. So eBay is, that's where I generally go. Also for me, it's convenient because we've discussed this a few times, right? I have a kind of a one in, one out policy. If I know I need something new, I'll often try and fund it as best as I can by selling the things that it's likely to replace. So I had a few pedals to sell to make room for this Nova system. So I sold those on eBay, and I'm buying the new thing on eBay as well. So it's kind of like it makes for a convenient process to do that. So eBay is where I've most often bought things from. I've never actually bought anything from Reverb, although I do quite often go on there to look for something if it's not on eBay. But have you used eBay and Reverb as well before?
Yeah, I've used both of them. I agree with you. I think there's probably more people and a bigger market, right, on eBay. So you can generally get a few more different choices of where to purchase stuff from on eBay, which is quite handy. Reverb obviously is a more specialist musician site. So I think what you get from Reverb is probably more dedicated traders, specialists in the type of thing that we're talking about, which is, guitars and used musical gear, which can add that additional level of reassurance, right? And Reverb's really useful as well for kind of tracking what market values of gear is going for, because you can see previous sale prices. And I think it's obviously a platform that's just better geared up to searching and looking for guitars and musical equipment. So I like Reverb. And I've bought stuff off Reverb as well, quite comfortably and quite successfully with no issues. I don't think the bargains are as profound or as available on Reverb, because you've probably got a marketplace where sellers, traders, buyers are more tuned into exactly what it is they've got and selling or are looking to buy. So you tend to get, I would say, more, fair market value to people also trying to charge more for the gear than it's worth, because of things like appreciation and the Joe Bonamassa effect.
A bit of a less diluted marketplace. Right.
Exactly.
eBay obviously is a massive place, whereas Reverb is very much the people who are coming to Reverb to shop. They're very focused on the product. So yeah.
Exactly. And then eBay, I mean, without sounding too opportunistic, sometimes the people selling stuff on eBay don't necessarily know the value of what that is going for, because they're selling it on behalf of someone, or they've not, if you've chosen to list something on eBay, I think then you might end up getting a better bargain sometimes.
Yeah.
It's a gross generalization, but maybe that's the virtues of eBay. But with both of those sites, it's kind of useful that you can see the sellers' ratings and their kind of track record and their feedback. So I think that's all really, really useful for those sites, and you can engage with those kind of sellers and ask them questions and do your homework with them and stuff. So both great sites, obviously, that people will be familiar with, but obviously you're still buying sight unseen generally, unless you use the kind of search facilities and filter facilities to narrow down what you're looking for to your local geography, and then arrange with the seller to maybe come and try it out and things. But
depends
the chances
on
of that are
yeah.
And then you've got things like Facebook Marketplace, which I've started to look at and use. Again, Facebook Marketplace just feels a little bit less regulated to me. And, but I do look at stuff on Facebook Marketplace and see if there's people, putting bargains. The process is quite convenient, and generally I find it better for local searches of stuff and things like that, because just the way that works. But then you've got guitar stores you can go to for secondhand gear online and physically in person.
Yeah.
And then there's the network of people that you speak to, and the guy down the pub. I've bought stuff from people down the pub when they've said, "Oh, you play guitar? I've got one of these for sale. Would you be interested in it?" So you can. There's all kinds of places you can go to get used gear.
What do you think are the risks with the methods that we've just spoke about in terms of buying and selling? What are the risks with using these services, and how do you mitigate them?
So look, some of these services like the eBay and like Reverb type sites, right? Obviously, they will have a degree of buyer protection built into them in terms of protecting you against fraudulent transactions. And if you pay on credit card and stuff like that, then maybe again that can help you, depending on where you are and what credit card laws and stuff you have. But certainly here in the UK, certain purchases above £100 are protected by credit card in case it all goes terribly wrong. But I think the biggest thing is not being able to physically hold the guitar in your hands and try it out and see if it is what you think it is, in the condition that you think it is in, or it's being described as being in your hands, and to see if it's the right thing for you. So I think it's fine for buying things like pedals or other gear, amps even, where you've just got to be assured and feel confident that if somebody says to you it's in good working order, that it is in good working order. Whereas buying a guitar, guitars are unique and different things, even from the same model to, you know, examples of the same model can vary by tolerances. And particularly when you get into buying used gear, it can be very difficult, even from really high-res photographs, to really see, you know, the types of things that you want to check out. I mean, how can you really determine, you know, the level of fret wear, or if the action's right, or if there's a twisted neck, or, you know, if the electronics are, you know, on their way out from photos? You've got to rely on what somebody's telling you. So I think that's probably the biggest risk. But again, through this checklist of things that we'll talk about today, you can ask some intelligent questions of people, of the vendor. But I would say, wherever possible, particularly if you're buying a guitar, try and get the opportunity to go and try it out. Especially if you're spending a considerable sum of money, make the effort to go and try it out first before you buy it. Mm-hmm. You may well have found it online on one of these sites, but, you know, try and find it locally or within a driving distance that you can get to before you exchange with your cash, is what I would say. I don't know. How do you feel about that? Would you be happy to just spend that sum of money based on a description alone without
it depends what I'm buying. Depends what I'm buying. If it's a pedal or even an amp, to be honest, if it's a pedal or an amp, I think if the price is reasonable and what I expect, and questions can be asked. I mean, an amp, for example, you could get the seller to potentially film or record, film them playing through it, so the functionality can be verified. Likewise with the pedal.
That's a good idea.
Not much really can go wrong with pedals, and if a pedal's been mistreated, it might be obvious anyway from the pictures. If it's really kind of scratched up, and you can see if a pedal's all scratched up, you think, well, that's not lived its life on a pedal board. That's been in somebody's bag and it's been rattling around for years or whatever. So I think the risks are kind of, you make your own choice. If you're going to pay top money for a Strymon Timeline secondhand, you should expect it to be in perfect nick with the box and things like that. But if you're getting yourself an old Boss SD1 something, and it's on the market for 25 quid, you shouldn't expect it to be in perfect condition. You should expect it to work. You might see that it's got one non-original knob on it. It's kind of, you have to decide for yourself what you're expecting to get for the price that you can afford to pay. So that's the first thing I would say. Now, if you're going and getting a guitar, then I think the same thing applies. If you want a perfect, let's say, Epiphone Les Paul, you just recently sold one, didn't you, secondhand? And
I did.
And you sold it for what would have been a reasonable price on the market. I think you were happy with the price you sold it for, but that guitar was in mint condition, right? Now, if you were a buyer looking for an Epiphone Les Paul and you didn't want to pay that kind of price, I think you have to remember to reconcile your expectations with the price you're willing to pay. If you're only willing to pay 150 quid, you should know what to expect for 150 quid. It's not going to be perfect. So if you're buying from a distance and you don't have any kind of distance buying protections like we sometimes get in this country with the Distance Selling Act and things like that, then you need to reconcile your expectations with what you're willing to pay, and then go from there. Then take the risk if you want to take the risk. I mean, if you're looking to buy, like a Gibson 335 or something like that, you need to check it out. You need to go and play it. You need to go and see the person, and you need to play it and make sure you're happy. Because if you're exchanging hundreds and hundreds of pounds, maybe thousands of pounds for something secondhand, go and check it out. If you can reconcile what your budget is with what you expect to get for that budget, then the risks are your own. Take them if you want. But obviously, when you get into a certain part of the market where, let's say, you're looking to buy, maybe a vintage instrument or something like a Gibson 335 that might, even secondhand, relatively new, nothing particularly unique, still might go into the thousands of pounds. There really is nothing other than to go and try it out. You have to try it out. You have to get it in your hands. So I think it changes from requirement to requirement.
Yeah, absolutely. So look, shall we get into this list of maybe some of the things to kind of check out if you can see the guitar in person, ideally, but even if you can't, to try and get the seller to take some pictures. Or I really love what you said about getting them to do a quick video of it, just so you can check out some of these things. Or at the very least, you can ask some questions of the vendor about certain things on this list. Should we get into some of those?
Yeah, and I guess one thing just to add it falls down to, in some degrees, you set your own standard, don't you, for what you think you want to be.
Yeah.
If you want to hear an amp, if you say to yourself, I won't accept buying a new amp unless I can hear it being played first and all the controls work, and then the buyer says, well, I'm not going to do that, then you should stick with your standard. You don't go, well, I do want that amp, I'm going to take the risk. You should remember to set the limit for what, at the minimum, you would accept being fulfilled before you kind of take the risk on something secondhand, and don't let that waver. Sorry to interrupt this super interesting conversation. However, if you've made it this far, maybe you should subscribe to the Guitar Smarts podcast. Go and do that now, and then let's get right back to it.
That's a really good point, Matt. And linked to that, I think it's important to say that this list is a list of things to check out and see what condition they're in. That doesn't mean if any of these things aren't perfect that you should walk away from the deal, because a number of these things on this list can be fixed, can be, adjusted, or can be remedied by a good guitar tech, and actually could be the difference between you getting a really good bargain price and then spending a bit of money getting some of these items rectified, or some of them, particularly if they're cosmetic, might not even bother you. So it's a non-issue. And as you say, it's just part of buying a used guitar. So yeah, I think this list is just a mental list of things to work through, just to kind of go, yeah, I've checked all these areas out. And some of them might be deal breakers. Some of them might just be useful for negotiation with the seller, or something to get remedied if you're happy with the overall price that is being charged for the guitar. Yeah. So look, I'm not going to make this list too in depth because I want it to be a quick kind of mental list of things. But by all means, stop me and kind of ask why you want to check some of these things out, or what it would look like if it's not right, and we can go into some of those detail. So I would say, like, first and foremost, before you even start playing the guitar, if you've managed to get it into your hands, kind of have a kind of logic to how you're going to check out this guitar, right? And some of these things will apply to when you're looking at a new guitar, but I've tried to look at this from the perspective of buying a used guitar, because there'll be things about this series of different things on the checklist which you'll definitely want to scrutinize if it's been used, because it can affect the way that the guitar plays. So I think the first thing is start at one end of the guitar and work your way down. So I look at the headstock area first. So first thing for me, headstock area, check if the back of the headstock, see if there's been any breaks or repairs, or if there's any cracks there. It's a particularly weak point on a number of guitars, particularly Gibson model guitars, which if dropped on the headstock can cause a crack, which is often repairable, and if done competently by somebody who knows what they're doing, can look really good and even be stronger than it was originally. But if it's done well, so just have a look at the back of the headstock. Hopefully, what you're looking for is a non-damaged, non-repaired headstock. But if it has been repaired, you just kind of want to know about it in advance. So then, while we're up there at the headstock area, kind of check the machine heads as well. Pretty obvious stuff there, but just on a used instrument, make sure that there's no kind of excessive like looseness to the way in which the gearing is working on them, or any kind of grinding where there's they're kind of dried out or got dirty inside the actual machine head unit, because if that is the case, then you're probably looking at wanting to change those out, and so that's going to cost a bit of money to do that. And machine heads aren't generally things you would tend to repair, particularly the inner mechanism of it. You just swap them out, so it could be a cost if you wanted to do that. And then, so working down through the other parts of the neck, the nut, have a look at it, see what it's made of. Is it a bone nut? Is that what it's being described as? Is it some sort of kind of Graphtec thing? Has it been cracked? Nuts, particularly through use, and if the guitar's been rested on tables and stuff like that, can have bits chipped off them. Sometimes can have cracks. It can have been adjusted or been cut badly by the current owner. So just have a look at the nut. Again, it's not a difficult thing for any guitar tech to remedy and replace, but you just want to know if that's something that you're going to have to address based on the condition of it, or if it's been adjusted. And quite a useful tip to check if the nut is been cut to the right height is if you press down on the fourth fret of the neck, and then with your thumb, and then leave it over with your index finger, and kind of measure the kind of amount of clearance at the first fret. There should be just the smallest amount of clearance at the first fret if you're holding down also at the fourth fret, and that will tell you if the nut is certainly at the right height or not. Or if it's been adjusted.
I've got a quick question for you, if you don't mind me just interjecting.
Yeah, please. Please do. Please.
No problem. So is there a fine line then here between trying to check if there are deficiencies in the guitar's setup that need to be corrected, or if they are simply setup preferences of the seller? And how do you know when one should be used as a bargaining tool and one is just, well, I just need to have it set up to my preference here? There's a difference there that shouldn't affect price.
Yeah, that's a really key question. And so all of the things that I'm talking about here are deficiencies in the guitar that would need to be rectified to make it then playable, or allow it to be set up, but to a player's particular preferences. So you're absolutely right. Guitars can be set up and should be set up to the individual playing it. And so it's not really good form to go along and say, well, I'm not going to buy this guitar because the action's not set properly for me, or it's either too high or it's too low, and I'm not buying it until you go and have it set up to my specs. That's not what we're talking about here. But if we use the last example, and if you've checked out the nut and you can see that there's, excessive wear to the grooves of it, or, it's had a chip taken off it such that a string, is pinging out of one of the slots, or, indeed it's been cut too low by somebody. Again, something that happens on used guitars. I see that a lot, right? If I'm looking at a new guitar, generally speaking, what I'm seeing is that the factory have deliberately cut it with a higher tolerance than what it could actually go down to, because they don't want any buzzing or kind of choking of strings. So they give a bit more clearance than is actually necessary to have it playing optimally. Right. So they'll have left it a bit higher. But what I see on a lot of used guitars is if they've been set up by somebody, or somebody's had a go at cutting the nut slots properly, and they weren't quite sure what they were doing, often or not, they go too low. It's like a really common mistake. People just go, the nut's too high, I'll have a go at it with some files. And it's one of those jobs where it's so easy to just go a bit too far, and then the guitar doesn't play as well as it should. So if you're seeing that that's happened with the nut on a used guitar, that would be a point of negotiation, or a point of kind of discussion with the seller to say, you know what, this nut's been cut a bit too low, or there's some damage to it. I'm going to need to replace the nut as a result of that. So that's going to run me X amount with my local guitar tech. But I love the guitar. Is there anything we can do on the price of it? Because, that's got to be remedied. So that's the kind of angle that I'm coming at it. And similarly, for machine heads or stuff like that, if they're not functioning in the way that they should, that should be a point of discussion, rather than you going, I just don't like the style of the machine heads that have been put on this guitar. I wanted, Grovers instead of Klusons or whatever. That's personal preference.
So it's incumbent upon the buyer then to make sure they understand the difference between a defect and a preference, right? You think? I mean, that's what I think. If I want to go and buy a guitar and it's set up poorly, but there's nothing inherently wrong, I need to understand that, well, is this set up poorly, or is it just set up for somebody else who prefers it like this? Exactly. And it was something we've spoken about before, actually. I think when we were talking about budget equipment back, some of the early podcasts, is even buying new guitars, it's good to factor in the cost of a good setup for a new guitar as well, because new guitars, as you just said, out of the box, they're set up to a particular tolerance, a particular standard, to allow the buyer to then make additional adjustments to suit them. You can take material off, but you can't add it back on. So cool. Okay, moving along then. What are the next things that you would check?
So we've looked at the headstock, we've looked at the machine heads, we've looked at the nut to see if there's any kind of cracks, repairs, height issues with it that are fouling the kind of strings. Now we're going to look at so we're working our way down towards the rest of the guitar now. So we're going to have a little bit of a closer look at the neck itself and particularly the fretboard. So, is it dry? Are there any cracks? Have any of the inlays started to unseat themselves if it's got some nice inlays in there? That's just, it gives you a gauge of how well the guitar might have been cared for. Again, not something you would necessarily see on a new instrument, although it might come a little bit dry and a bit of oiling will fix that. But on a used instrument that's not been stored correctly or been treated well, particularly if it's an older instrument, that a dry fingerboard could turn into, a cracked fingerboard or, something where, the inlays have started to move or what have you. And then, in turn, the frets. This is something, where you're going to get a real indication as to what you're buying, right? And have a look at how the guitar frets are in terms of what's the wear on them like. Is it even wear across the length of the neck? Are there particular areas where the frets have been more heavily played, like we often see, particularly between the 1st and 7th frets or things like that? You often tend to see some more wear. Again, not an issue. It's a used guitar. You're probably wanting it to have a bit of wear on it to show that it's been loved and played and enjoyed by somebody. But, at the same time, you want to ensure that you're paying an appropriate price for something if the frets are causing any issue with how the action can be set for you, because there are some divots on there. There is some excessive fret wear that you would want to have rectified. Again, it's another discussion point, isn't it, with the seller? I would always check there is enough kind of meat left on the fret wires across the length of the neck to allow for at least one, if not two, full leveling and recrowning of the frets. You don't want to be buying a guitar necessarily that's right on the verge of needing a refret, because that's an expensive job, unless the price of the guitar and what the guitar is kind of justifies the fact that it's still a great guitar and it's just going to need a refret. But these are all things just to be aware of that you might have to outlay on.
Quick question. So, I wouldn't know how much material is enough for a recrown so if you're like me, what's the best way to maybe gauge if you've got enough material on the existing frets for a level and a recrown? Is there a way to check that? Is there a tool you should buy or
not really? There are tools you can buy in terms of you can use like a digital set of calipers and things like that to kind of measure the exact height of the frets that are there. I think this is one of those things that you just kind of look at by eye, and you speak to the person selling it and say, has it had a recrown or a refret before? And you kind of have to visually just look and see. With a full level and recrown, you're probably going to be taking anywhere. We're talking like fractions of millimeters in some instances off the fret wire. But what I would say is if you're looking at the profile of the fret wire, so, kind of sighting it from the edge of the fingerboard and across the width of the neck, you're going to be wanting there to be at least a couple or 3 mil of fret wire there to allow for some leveling and recrowning. So if it looks like the fret wire is really close to the board, it may have already been leveled and recrowned. And then if you've got some, divots and real flat spots, you might look at that and go, there's not a lot of wire left there. That's a long-winded way of saying, for most people, unless you're going to take along a set of digital calipers and kind of measure the height of the fret and all of that, which I wouldn't advise kind of necessarily doing. If you're concerned about it, take some pictures, get some advice from a guitar tech before you park the cash if it's a particularly expensive piece of guitar.
That's a good tip. But that's a really great bit of advice.
Yeah, just take some pictures if you're unsure. Yeah, if you're unsure, if you're looking at it, because I can quite easily tell from a picture, and I do this for people for quotes and things, when they go, I think I need a refret or whatever, I'm like, can you just take some really nice close-up pictures if you can of the frets across the fretboard, and take them some at a distance and take some close up, and I can generally gauge from a photo whether there's enough meat left on there to do some just leveling and recrowning versus doing a full refret. So
again, going back to personal preferences, so I guess there's also a gauge to be made here of maybe there's enough meat left on the frets for a leveling and a recrown, but will that take the frets below what you prefer as a guitarist? So some guitarists like quite tall, skinny frets. Some of them like relatively flat, fat fret wire. So a lot of this is also about taking your preferences into account in finding the right instrument, as well as looking for defects and things to be concerned about. Right?
Exactly. And I think if you are concerned in any way, ring up your local tech and get their advice on it, or just don't feel pressured into making a purchase. Your gut will tell you whether it's the right thing or not, and you'll be able to play it and see also how much fret wear there is on the guitar. You can visibly see little indentations, and flat areas that can cause buzzing and choking when you're trying to play or string bend. And, minor little dings and divots and wear into the frets is completely normal, right? It's part of owning a guitar. I would say if you can run your fingernail across the top though of those dings and indentations on the fret wire, and if you can physically feel your thumbnail, let's say, sinking into those dents and divots, then that is definitely likely to be something that's going to interfere with how the action can be set on that guitar and potentially the playability of that guitar. If you slide your fingernail across the top of those indentations on the fret wire that you see, and it's not really very noticeable by the way in which your fingernail sinks into those, it's probably going to be fine, and it's just a cosmetic piece of wear rather than an intrusive piece of wear that's going to foul the string.
Cool. Okay. So you mentioned action then. Is that the next piece to look at?
Yeah, it is. And it goes back to the point that you were saying, Matt, which is around personal preference, right? If it feels a little bit too high or a little bit too low for your own playing style, probably just a personal preference thing, and that can be adjusted. So no issues there. What we're talking about here is things like if it's way, way too low, where it's, really causing buzzing and choking out on the strings, you'd want to be trying to understand why that might be. And again, this could be a little red flag. Similarly, if it's like way, way too high, where you just go, well, how has anyone been playing this guitar? The likely answer is they probably haven't. And there could be, and that's why they're selling it. And it could be due to some, more serious issues with either the truss rod that, is not working correctly, bowing in the wood of the neck, or the way in which the neck has been glued in or, bolted onto the guitar, which is causing it to be at completely the wrong angle. We're talking about like serious action issues here, and I've sadly seen people, that have brought guitars to me, thankfully not too many, it doesn't happen that often, but where they go, I've just not really enjoyed playing this guitar because the action's way too high and I've just never really got on with it. So it just needs a decent setup. And then you kind of look into it and you have to break the news to them that, this used guitar that they've bought, or even in some instances, a new guitar that they've bought, has got some more serious issues with the neck, which means no amount of adjusting or tweaking is going to bring that action down unless we remedy what is a significantly more expensive issue with the neck, which sometimes I can do if it's truss rod related. But if we're talking about, having to steam off a neck on a glued in instrument and then, reseat it at the right angle and things, that's beyond my workshop capabilities because I'm not a full luthier. I'm a tech, and it's an expensive specialist job. So, so I just, these are little kind of things. Just check out the action. Is it ballpark in the right place? Fine. Carry on. If it's grossly, spot the dangers. Exactly. Then, look, electric guitars, the pickup condition, have a look at it. Again, used guitars, used by people, you should expect it. They're not going to be pristine pickups necessarily, but, are the pole pieces slightly rusted over from, sweat and corrosion and grime? Is that interfering with the way in which the guitar plays in any way? Are the pickup rings cracked? I see that quite a bit from people that have, bashed heavily on a guitar. Again, it's not a deal breaker. You can very easily replace pickup rings, but you might want to try and negotiate a better price if that's the case. Microphonic issues, that's probably more of an issue with the pickups. So, again, if you can plug it in and try it out, are you getting kind of strange squealing or humming noises, or indeed when you tap on any other parts of the guitar that are metal, does it feel like that sound is being amplified through the amp as well, to the point where the guitar has become microphonic? And that microphonic issue can, again, potentially be remedied if it's an expensive guitar and you want to keep the pickups by repotting them. But again, that's the cost. Or it might mean you've got to switch out the pickups. Or it could be really something as simple as like the pickup casing on a PAF pickup is a bit loose and causing vibrations that mean it's making it microphonic, and just removing the pickup case could fix it. But there's a whole heap of things it could be, but what you want to do is check it out to see if there's an issue. And if there is, have a chat about it before you buy the guitar. What else? What else can we be checking out? Well, I would say the bridge. The bridge is a main contact piece with people kind of, particularly if the person that's used it before is somebody that's, has, how do I say this nicely without it sounding disgusting, but kind of sweat that causes issues or corrosion to the guitar. Happens, right? So, make sure the saddle isn't sagged. If it's kind of like a ABR type Les Paul saddle where they can sag due to the pressure over the saddle itself, or if it's like a kind of Strat or Tele style saddle, just have a look and see, how much corrosion, how much wear is there on the saddle. It's all fixable, but again, you don't necessarily want to buy the guitar thinking it's lovely and then you're experiencing all kinds of string breakages or action changes because the saddle itself is not working in the way that it should because it's been corroded through use. So that's one area. Electrics, again, check them. Check they're all working. Check all the positions of the selector switch if it's an electric guitar you're buying. Turn all of the knobs and any of the push-pulls. Check for any crackling, audio dropouts, stuff just not responding in the way that it should electronically. Again, it's all fixable, but it could be a cost if you have to change out pots or anything like that. Similarly for jack sockets, while you're doing that, check the jack socket, make sure the plug goes in easily, doesn't fall out, there's no cracks or anything noisy. I think that's pretty much the basic list of checking it out. Guitars with trems and stuff like that have again another series of checks you'd want to do. Make sure that the trem seems to be working, it's not fouling on the guitar body or scratch plate in any way. Again, trems are adjustable with spring tension and things. But I think if you run through that list of stuff and, then get a chance to play the guitar itself and feel that it's the right guitar that's playing and behaving itself for you, I think you'd probably come away with a really good guitar that you're happy with and you've done your due diligence on, or you'll at least have a series of conversation points for the buyer where you go, look, I really love the guitar, but there's these couple of things that I've spotted that I think might need to be fixed. Can we have a chat about the price and see if they're open to that or not? So yeah, hopefully that list is a useful list for people just to kind of work through.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's really good because it's gonna make you feel more comfortable going into a potential transaction as well with somebody else, in knowing what you're checking, what you're potentially buying and spending good money on. I think those things are all really important. I like the fact that is it clean? As well, surely the seller's actually put some effort into cleaning the thing up before, and that's a sign, isn't it? It's, if you're looking at somebody who's selling an instrument and their instrument is dusty and dirty, then you can expect that the guitar's been cared for in that manner, over the years that person's owned it in a poor way.
I think so. I think so. Well, you know what I'm like about my cleanliness with stuff, but you know, it's an interesting one. Now we're getting into kind of around the cosmetic side of it, right? Which is, you know, you might have a guitar. Like I had one of these that I did for somebody. It was I think it was a BC Rich. From recollection, which had literally just been stored in somebody's loft for God knows how many years, and it just, you know, not in a case or anything like that. So it just accumulated a layer of dust, as you would imagine, from that amount of time. So was it clean? No, because it had been stored in those conditions for an excessive period of time. Was there anything wrong with the guitar? Actually, no. Once you'd got through all of that and cleaned it all out thoroughly, it just hadn't been touched. So, but you know, sometimes people, if they haven't stored their guitars in correct conditions and it's covered in a layer of grime, and that's because it's been stored in a garden shed somewhere, you know, and then you start to try and make adjustments to it, and you realise the electrics have got moisture throughout them, or you know, the neck is warped, or you know, the truss rod is all rusted and it's just not going to adjust. Those are alarm bells, versus somebody that's selling something that they've obviously loved and cared for and kept clean and neat. You go, well, you know, by and large, the kind of value of this guitar would seem to be inherent in the fact that somebody's cared for it. So yeah, I think those kind of things. But the cosmetic side of it is, you know, if you're buying a used guitar, you've then got to set your barometer of how much cosmetic wear and tear you're willing to kind of accept. Versus the price, you know. And we saw this when we were doing episode 9, right, where there was people that were kind of calling stuff player grade guitars or, you know, has been gigged a bit, and you go, there's a difference between a couple of little dents or things here that show it's had a bit of a life, and chunks missing out of something where it's been dropped, or, you know, someone's booted it, or someone's just dragged it, you know, around. You know, people love a relic guitar, right? And that's fine if that's the look that you're going for. But then, you know, don't call it player grade guitar when it's just been blatantly abused. But if that's the look you're going for and that appeals to you, then brilliant. You know, it's not an issue, right? But just make sure these aren't serious cracks that go through the guitar. You know,
exactly.
It's so funny.
The thing,
it's so funny.
Just
isn't
speaking
it?
about relic guitars as well, the thing I like about some of those relic guitars is that kind of wear and tear that's happened or has been synthesized. It looks like the wear and tear that comes from playing a guitar, or from a guitar being very well favoured over time because it's been played so much. But when somebody's got a guitar that, like you said, has got a chunk missing out of it because maybe somebody hit it with a Hoover, you know, whilst trying to clean, vacuum clean whilst trying to clean the room. That's not relicking. That's abuse of the instrument. You can't say that, it's missing its strap button and it's got scratches across the bottom of it. That's not relicking, that's miscard. No. But if it's got wear and tear across the scratch plate and a few places, you know, where your hand would be and your fingers on the fretboard, that is, you know, the love and affection of playing over time affecting the instrument, is it?
That's
All
it.
The differences.
That's it. A little bit of buckle rash here, a little bit of kind of wear to the back of the neck where it's kind of smoothed out, a bit of the kind of glossiness of it, and you go, someone's loved this guitar and enjoyed playing it, and you go, that's character stuff. That's it, you know. Versus, I love that analogy. Someone's hit it with the Hoover. It's relics. It's not relics. That's
not the same thing.
Why is no one out there? No one's out there relicking classical or acoustic guitars, are they?
Exactly.
That's just damaged.
Know what you're buying. I've got another quick question for you, actually, before we kind of just go over the last points about buying, which is, do you think it's important to you as a buyer to do some deep research on the instrument that you're potentially looking to buy? Because maybe you want to check for certain, if you don't fully understand the specifications of the guitar you're buying, you might not spot things that don't fit, you know. So, you know, like maybe you're looking to buy I'm trying to think of an example. You're looking to buy a Les Paul that used to come with like a bone nut, and you don't notice when you're looking at it that it's just got a plastic nut. Should you be doing your research beforehand to say, I know what the specs of this instrument should be from the factory, so that I know what to check for if there's anything different. Or maybe that comes down to helping you spot a fake instrument, which is a problem that we see in the marketplace.
Well, it's a really good point, mate. I think this is about this buying with confidence, isn't it? And fakes can be difficult to spot unless you really know your stuff, right? Unless you've got, here he is again, unless you've got Joe Bonamassive like encyclopedic knowledge of whether somebody has used the period correct grub screw to attach the scratch plate, which he will know. Exactly. He will know if you've cheated him on the wrong type of grub screw, or he'll know. He'll be onto you. He'll be onto you. And that's amazing, right? I covet that level of knowledge where you can just look at a guitar and go, well, that's from this year, and because in this year they stopped using this particular piece of material and they switched out to using this, and Bob, who was working in the factory at the time, had a particular preference for like zebra bobbins and all of that kind of stuff. And so I knew, it all gets a little bit too kind of crazy, but generally speaking, do some research, as you've said, right? Does the description make sense for that guitar? Does the price, that's the biggest giveaway generally? Does the price seem in keeping with the instrument, or is somebody offering to sell you a 58 Gibson Les Paul for $200? And you go, well, is it real? Is that right?
It's definitely not.
You kind of. It's probably not. It's probably not.
If a 58 Gibson was on sale for $200, Joe Bonamass would have bought it already. Surely, it won't be on the market anymore.
Exactly. There's none left. There's none left on the market. He's got them all. So yeah, the backstory kind of helps. Like, speak to somebody and say, well, where did you get this guitar? What's the age of it? How long have you had it? These are all really reasonable questions. Has it been gigged? Do a bit of research into what you're trying to buy, and don't just necessarily take for granted that it's got Fender written on the headstock, that it's a genuine, real deal. Especially if the price and backstory and things like that don't stack up. The other thing that I get quite a lot is people are confused about, they can't exactly remember when they bought their guitar or the age of it, or but this is where Google is brilliant. There's so many different search engines that have been built where you can do a serial number search on your guitar, select what manufacturer it is, and it will tell you which factory it came out of, what the year of manufacture, all of that stuff. You should be asking of the seller, can you just tell me what the serial number is for the guitar, please? If it's easily accessible. And they'll give it to you. Type that in, do your research on the serial number to make sure the serial number stacks up with what it is you're buying.
That's a really good tip.
Don't know what else do you think will give people confidence of buying stuff secondhand?
That's a question, really, isn't it? I think the problem here is mitigation, isn't it? You're always going to be looking for, and I guess, like we said at the beginning, you have to know, that there's potential compromise to be made, and you have to, I guess, before you go into a transaction, try and know beforehand what are you willing to buy and what aren't you willing to buy, and don't waver from that standard of what you expect for yourself. And I think if you understand fully what that threshold is, you should know when you meet that threshold, or you don't, or you go past it. And I think at some point then you can buy with confidence. I think being armed with knowledge beforehand, sitting down and thinking about, what am I expecting for my money? What do I accept and what will I not accept? And if you can really define those things beforehand, then you'll automatically, I guess, reach a point at some point in the buying cycle where you go, this is acceptable for me if the price is right. So I guess there's some serious thought to do beforehand that I think will help you out as a buyer when you're looking to buy something, rather than just going, hey, I want a Les Paul, I'll go and look at that one. Try and define it beforehand, what you really want, and that's going to help you.
Exactly. That's really cool advice. It's so difficult though, isn't it? We all do it do it because we look at something and we go, oh, that looks
it's
nice.
very emotionally
that looks pretty.
Actually, we want something that's going to make us feel good when we're playing guitar. So it looks good hung up on the wall. It's a very emotionally led thing. It's not just. I think this is also why I find it very easy to buy things like amps or pedals and stuff, because those aren't for me very emotionally led. I view them as very much a functional thing. I want a particular sound.
Right.
How can I get that sound? But guitars are so tactile. Everything about them is such a sensory experience. It's different, isn't it, for guitars? Probably why I've never really, maybe once or twice in my life, bought secondhand guitars. And not that you shouldn't, but I just haven't really. I think I'd find it quite hard. But I think what we've discussed today is really going to help a lot of people to have a better experience. I mean, the tips that you've given us is fantastic. They are fantastic, to be grammatically correct. And I think buying with confidence is the problem. You hit the nail on the head. How do you buy with confidence? I think following all those tips and being careful with what you do and trying to take the emotion out of the buying decision that you make that's going to really help a lot of people to get some good bargains and to find the right thing.
Yeah, exactly. That's all you could do, right? Because the heart wants what the heart wants, realistically. Even that list of stuff I've come up with, I still think every guitar I've ever bought has been based on the looks of it. For sure. I bought it because of how it looks, but I've got that checklist of things to run through to make sure that it's not a complete dog that I'm buying, and I know I can fix most of those things if they do turn out to be points of negotiation and things. But I would say there are still quite a lot of things that I've walked away from because it's looked absolutely beautiful and my heart has gone, yeah, get that. It looks stunning. But then I've worked through that list and I've gone, no, I've got to be happy to walk away from this one because it's just not going to be a cost-effective option.
And like you say, it should be something that you find beautiful to look at as well, because even if it satisfies all of those points that you made and it plays brilliantly and it's in perfect condition, if it still looks like a Parker Fly, you're not going to want to buy it.
Oh, poor Parker
the Fiat multiplier of the guitar world. I mean,
was it as ugly as the Fiat multiplier? That is the worst car that anybody has ever decided to build in my life. Gee whiz, the Parker Fly. Did they get any endorsement for?
I think they did.
Were there any famous? Who was
potentially like Robert Fripp or something of King Crimson?
Oh, really?
King Crimson. I don't know. Well, listeners, somebody correct us on this. Fact check alert. Somebody please tell us if anybody ever took an endorsement with the Parker Fly and if they are still a relevant musician.
It's Guitar of the Future, wasn't it? It was like carbon. Was it all carbon fiber? Did it even have a real pickup? Was it?
I don't think it was carbon. I think it was like graphite. I think it had like a graphite neck, so you could play guitar with it and take notes. With it, like a pencil.
Like a pencil.
Probably a fantastic guitar. Probably like, do you know what? It plays beautifully, but it did look like, I don't know. It's almost like the design printed incorrectly and they just went ahead with it anyway. No.
Do you know what? This is really taking me back down memory lane because I for a brief moment when it came out in, I guess what it must have been the 90s, I really did think I was worried that this was the future of where guitars were going to go because, it's just like, don't everyone start making guitars like this and phase out, Strats and Les Pauls and Tellys and 335s and all these beautiful things that I coveted but couldn't afford because I thought by the time I get round to being able to afford some of these, if I ever do in my lifetime, all that'll be left, it'd be like a guitar shop full of Parker Flies.
Well, do you know what? This is, and it's a subject for another podcast, I think, which is because I've always found it strange how the guitar industry seems to be incredibly resistant to like modernization almost. Do you know what I mean? All the most popular guitars Strats and Les Pauls are still very old designs. Guitar amplification, all the best guitar amps are stuff that still kind of, people claim is old type design, valve technology. And there is a kind of a snobbery towards more modern technology like modeling and digitization and some of the more modern guitar. I mean, how much were Gibson chastised when they brought out that robotic tuner on the Les Paul? Do you remember that? I'm not saying it's a good thing, by the way.
Oh God, yeah. I still haven't forgiven them, and it wasn't even it wasn't even JC's kind of making. This was in the Henry years, but I, as somebody that is really like steeped in marketing and brand building, in my day job, like when that came out, I was literally using it as an example in kind of training marketeers on how to single-handedly destroy your brand equity and value and heritage by literally strapping on, a robot tuner onto one of the most beautiful things ever made. It's just like putting a solar panel on a Rolls-Royce and going, we found a new way to power this. It's just
I do find it bizarre how, almost every other area of technology, progression and modernization seems to make improvements. Whereas in our industry, it's almost looked down upon. It's kind of, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. What Leo Fender did in 1952.
Well, you know why that is.
It's still the best thing. But why is that? Why can't we accept improvements in technology as a good thing in the guitar industry? It doesn't seem to be admired. Bizarre.
Well, I know the reason. We've come full circle. We've given him a lot of abuse, but I think we've got to actually thank Joe Bonamassa for not buying up the world's supply of Parker Flies in 1990. All hail to Joe Bonamassa not being a fan of the Parker Fly. Could you imagine the alternate reality where a young Joe Bonamassa all of a sudden lusted after a Parker Fly and went on Guitar Safari and bought every single one of them? We'd be all living.
Oh my God!
Oh God! In a horrible universe where Parker Fly was the only thing that we could
Can you
buy.
Imagine that. It's like some kind of North Korea of guitar playing.
There'd be all these 59 Les Pauls sat there kind of corroding in junkyards going, nobody loved me anymore because Joe bought all the Parker Flies.
Yeah, you can.
There we go.
Well, there we go. We put the world to rights. So buy with confidence, do your research, define what you're happy with, be confident in the choice you're making, try and allow for, the time to inspect and know what you're inspecting. Most importantly, and you said it at the end, be prepared to walk away if you're not happy. Fantastic.
Absolutely.
Good stuff. Well, that was a good one, man. I really enjoyed that. And I hope everyone else did too.
I really enjoyed it. The first thing I'm doing after this podcast is going on to Reverb and seeing if I can buy a Parker Fly. I really want one now.
The Fiat Multipler of guitars.
If you've never seen a Fiat Multipler, go and Google that. Oh man, I'm going to drive around to Bonamassa's house in my Multipler with like a Parker Fly and see if we can be friends.
This is a gold top Parker Fly. This is a 59 Parker Fly.
It's a Parker Fly with a Bigsby.
Imagine that.
It's called the traditional model.
Fly with Bigsby.
The meeting of two worlds.
Yeah. But in racing wheels.
It's a carbon multiple. It's a carbon fibre Bigsby, I'll let you know.
Oh dear, I feel slightly queasy now all of a sudden.
Yeah, me too.
So anyway, go and look at a picture of a Fiat Multipler, then a Parker Fly, and then you'll probably feel as queasy as I do as well. Right. Good stuff. All right, Kiran Matt, cracking chat, and I will speak to you next week.
Yeah, lovely to speak to you, buddy. Have a great week. See you again next week.
Bye bye.
Another really interesting conversation this week. We hope you enjoyed it. Come back for more next week from the Guitar Smarts team. Come say hello to us on our social media pages. Remember to like and subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts so you never miss a show. Thanks again and see you soon.